Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 5 o'clock, so welcome. We're glad to have everybody back. Welcome, you're halfway there. How can that be? How can you only be halfway there?
If you're still losing weight in a year, then you're good.
Yeah, or if you've still kept it off. Yeah, if you've kept that off. So my definition of successful weight loss, remember, is not the ability to lose the weight, but the ability to lose the weight and for how long?
Forever.
Just until you're dead. Nobody gains weight after you die. So this is where we try to set ourselves apart from others, and not just the ability to lose weight, but now how do we keep it off for the rest of your life? So you're halfway there, you've lost weight. This is great. Now the key is we want to keep it off for the rest of your life. So this is a rock star group. So I will not share anybody's individual results, but if I combine them together enough, you don't know the difference. So, so let me share. There's 5 of you in this graduating class, and this is where I'm going to play a little bit of a fun game. You know how much you lost. Some of you might know how much your spouses have lost, but you don't know how much anybody else has lost in the room. So what I want to do is I want to have you guess, how much do you think the total weight loss of the 5 graduates tonight? What's your guess on how many total pounds for the 5 graduates?
220.
220. Good guess. Closer to 300.
340.
340. See, there's somebody who's lost some weight because they guess high. 256.3 pounds. Now, I have to emphasize this. If we were to divide that by 5 with the 5 participants, do you realize that's 51.26 pounds per person? You tell me what would happen if we took those that were overweight and obese in the rest of the world, in the rest of the United States, and helped them lose 30 to 50 pounds. What would happen to the health of those individuals? What would happen to the health of the nation? The doctors would go out of business. The healthcare crisis is founded in our lifestyle, and largely it's because of overweight or obese. So congratulations to all of you on your weight loss. You've done spectacular. So I like to start off by saying, what have you noticed that's different? So tell me the good, the bad, the ugly of the diet. What have you noticed in this course of losing weight? What have you noticed? Going up and down stairs easier without using your hands for your legs. Good. What else? More endurance. So you're not fatiguing as fast. So do you remember when you noticed that your energy levels were up? Was it before you lost a bunch of weight? It was after. A lot of people will notice an increase in energy level within the first couple of weeks, not the first week. The first week is a little bit of a downer week, but after 2 or 3 weeks, they notice their energy levels come up. And the reason is because you're burning ketones for a source of energy, and those ketones are just high octane fuel, so their energy levels a lot of times will come up. Good. What else? Veggies taste good. So is this a difference than before you started the diet? And this is huge. Your taste buds change when you're in the phase 1 of the protocol. Now, don't sidetrack me too long or I'll keep you here all night. The food industry, remind me what they're interested in. Are they interested in your health? No. What are they interested in? Your pocketbook. They want you to be able to buy food. So they have whole departments that are developed for research and development. And they do something called food engineering. And they want to find the right crunchiness of a product, the right size of a particle to stimulate the taste buds just right. And the reason they want those just right and so satisfying, we call them hyper palatable foods, foods that taste really good. Why do they want hyper palatable foods? So you buy more and more and more. So when you go in phase 1 and you cut those out, what happens is there's really a reset on your taste buds. And now vegetables start to taste good. How many of you are currently in phase 2? Everybody's in phase 2, right? Or phase 3? Phase 2 or 3? Okay, good. How sweet was fruit the first time you tasted it after not tasting it for a while? Yeah, so that really is a reset. So good. Glad your taste buds changed. What else? What else is different? What else have you noticed? Anybody have any blood work done before or after? Your blood pressure's down. Good. Makes a huge difference. We'll find that tonight. We'll find out why tonight. I'll show you the reason blood pressure comes down when you're on the program. And it's not what you think it is necessarily. It does help to take the fat off because there's less stress on the organs, but there's also another reason for the blood pressure being down. We'll review that.
I got taken off of one diabetic pill.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Yeah.
So what happens is the less diabetic medications you have to take in order to keep your blood sugars within reasonable range, that means the longer and higher quality life you will have in the future. That's just indisputable. Very good. Any others? Anybody notice that the chairs are a little harder than they were the first time you sat in here? Anybody notice when you lay on bed, you have pressure points where you didn't realize you had pressure points before? Anybody have knee or feet pain before that's decreased? And so there's a lot of reason for that. A lot of people will notice decrease in knee or hip pain or arthritis type systems really within the first couple of weeks. And it's not because they lost so much weight, but what's happened is they're on an anti-inflammatory diet. And when you pull the inflammation out, what happens to the pain? It decreases. So those simple carbs are fuel to inflammation. So when you cut the simple carbs out, it calms that fire down. Good. Very good. Well, congratulations. Like I said, this is a rock star group. We usually are around 30, 32 pounds per dieter. This is 56.26 or 51.26. So this is great. So anybody concerned now about gaining the weight back? Yeah, which is why we have this class, this graduating class. When we started this program 14 years ago, we found that after people lost the weight, we kind of had to kick them out of phase 1. They didn't want to go out of phase 1. And after about a year and a half, we decided, well, the reason they don't want to go to phase 1 is because they're worried that they're going to gain the weight back. And so we started this graduating class. And during the first class, we taught you the science of how to lose weight, why it works. So during this class, we're going to teach you the science of keeping it off for the rest of your life. And so if you'll follow, just like you followed the diet to lose the weight, if you follow this program the way we'll show it for phase 2 and phase 3, you'll keep that weight off for the rest of your life. So I'm excited to show it to you. So more science. Aren't you glad you came? Aren't you glad you came back? And so we're going to do this, try to do it in a fun format so it's not too boring. We're going to do it by giving you 2 balances and 5 tips for long-term success. So these 2 balances that we're going to start with, these 2 balances are like a 2-act play. So have any of you been to a 2-act play before? So let's say you go to a 2-act play and at intermission you leave and you don't see the second act of the play. How much sense does the play make now? Yeah, not a lot of sense. So let's say you come to a 2-act play, you arrive late, they keep you in the foyer till the first act is done, so you get in for the second act of a 2-act play. How much sense does the play make? So with this program, these 2 balances are like a 2-act play. You need to understand them and you need to live by them if you want to keep that weight off for the rest of your life. So we'll present our 2 balances like a 2-act play, and then we'll give you at the end, we'll give you 5 tips for long-term success. So 2 balances for your 2-act play. The first balance, caloric balance. So tell me, how many calories you've been counting during the weight loss portion of the program? None. How many of you been counting calories during phase 2 or phase 3? None. So why in the world do we start out by saying the key to success, the first act of the play or the first balance is a caloric balance? Because it matters. So we'll talk about how we account for that even without counting the calories. But calories make a difference. If you eat more calories than you burn, what happens? It gets stored as your extra calories get stored as fat for future use. If you consume less calories than you burn, what happens? Then you lose weight. And so with phase 2 and phase 3, we don't want to be gaining weight and we don't want to be losing weight. We want to be maintaining or having a balanced weight. So if you're out of balance on calories, you gain weight. If you're out of balance on calories the other way, you lose weight. So we're going to talk about caloric balance. So first phase of the program, were you on a calorically balanced diet? No. Did anybody figure out how many calories you were consuming a day? Thank you. Nobody did. There's usually somebody that has figured it out. Any guesses how much you were consuming in a day? 800 to 1,000 calories. Yeah, so it's 800 to 1,000 calories. Now remind me, average metabolism is around how many calories? 2,000 calories, which is why we base the US RDA on a 2,000 calorie diet. And so why in the world did we take half of your calories away? So you would burn fat, yes. But I will tell you the reason we did it is because we like you and it was an act of mercy to take those calories away. Now I'm going to demonstrate that so you see, because it truly is. So here's what happens. If we talk about standard wisdom in weight loss, you've heard this before, if you lose 1 to 2 pounds per week, we're going to call that healthy weight loss, right? 1 pound a week. Remind me how many calories in a pound of fat. I told you not to forget. How many calories in a pound of fat? 3,500 in a pound of fat. So if you're going to lose 1 pound a week, you need to go in a caloric deficit of how many calories for 7 days? 500 calories. And this is what standard wisdom is you take 500 calories out of your diet and you'll have healthy weight loss. So let me demonstrate how this really works. If I'm standing here, how long can I stand here? Relatively long period of time. How long can I sit? A relatively long period of time. Sitting is like being in a non-ketotic state, non-ketosis. Standing is being like being in ketosis. I can do both of them relatively easily. When I take 500 calories out of your diet for the day or for the week, I take you from a non-ketotic state to kind of in ketosis. How comfortable is this? Answer quickly so I don't have to stay here very long. How long can I do it? Eventually my legs will get out or my mind will give out. And so what we did is we said, we like these people, we want them to succeed. Let's take more calories away, another 500 calories away, and pop them good into ketosis. Now, how comfortable was it, or is it? Relatively comfortable. So this is why we cut so many calories out, so that we could get you in a comfortable state of dietary ketosis, so you could maintain it for a period of time. Does that make sense? And so phase 1 of the diet, you were not on a calorically balanced diet. Phase 2, we started to stabilize you by increasing the calories to see if we could stabilize your weight. And now we're in phase 3, we need to be calorically balanced. Does that make sense? This is why caloric balance is important. So we didn't count calories in phase 1, we didn't count calories in phase 2, and we didn't count calories in phase 3. How did we account for your calories? By servings. We said you have this much of it, and we told you what a serving was. You can have this many servings. In other words, it's called portion control. Another word for caloric balance is just don't consume too large of portions. Does that make sense? And so phase 1, we put you in a caloric deficit so that you would burn fat as your source of energy to make up that caloric deficit. Phase 2, we added calories back into where you no longer were in nutritional ketosis. You're now balanced out. We stabilized. We found what your macro code is, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then we can roll you into phase 3 once you figure out how you can eat to keep that weight off for the rest of your life. So do you see why caloric balance is important? If you have too many calories, you gain weight. If you have too little calories, you lose weight. If you have the same amount of calories, a caloric balance, you maintain weight. So that's important. Now, there's one other area of caloric balance that I need to point out to you. We talked about the macros. What are the macros? Those are those big nutrients called carbs, protein, and fat. So carb, protein, fat. So the foods we eat are carbs, proteins, or fat, or a combination of those. Here's something you need to know about caloric balance. 1 gram of a carbohydrate has 4 calories in it. 1 gram of a protein has 4 calories in it. 1 gram of a fat, 9 calories. Do you see why we went low carb, low fat? Because it's heavier in the calories. Now, does this make you a fatophobe? This should not make you a fatophobe. Fats are necessary. They're healthy. There's healthy fats. But does this make you aware? Do you need to be aware of what kind of foods you're eating? Absolutely. When you're eating foods that are higher in fats, what do you need to do? Watch your portion control. And that's why we have it measured out as to what your fats are and what the portion, the serving size is on those. Does that make sense? All right. That's caloric balance. Now, I'm going to attempt to do a quick magic trick for you because people tend to think it's easier to gain fat than it really is. So my magic trick is to show you it's harder to gain fat than you think it is. It's a pretty good trick, isn't it? So I'm going to take a theoretical. We have a theoretical coming up here this weekend. It's called Labor Day weekend. So how many of you think you can gain 5 pounds of fat in a weekend? No takers. What if we give you a 3-day weekend? It's Labor Day weekend, and we add a Monday onto that Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Now, do you think you can gain 5 pounds of fat? Yeah, I'm getting some looks. So let's put another day on that. Let's do a 4-day weekend. Let's go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. How many of you think you can gain 5 pounds of fat in a 4-day weekend? So we've got some takers on that. So let's take a look at the science of gaining 5 pounds of fat in a 4-day weekend. So this is going to take a little bit of math. So if you need to take your shoes off so you get your toes for the math, you do this. So 5 pounds of fat. That means we have to consume how many calories? 3,500 calories per pound times 5 is 17,500 calories. Now wait, that's not all. That's 17,500 extra calories. You're burning calories every day. How many calories? About 2,000 calories. So do you see I need to take 2,000 times 4 for a 4-day weekend to give me 8,000 extra calories to give me a total of 25,500 calories in a 4-day weekend. Do you have any idea how much 25,500 calories is? That's a lot. And so you remember Michael Phelps, Olympic swimmer? When he was training for the Olympics in Greece, this was a lot of years ago, but when he was training for the Olympics in Greece, he was consuming copious amounts of food. And so they kind of did a documentary on him, and he was consuming about 12,000 calories per day of food. Now, I want you to picture Michael Phelps in your mind. Is Michael Phelps fat? Absolutely not. So how in the world can he be consuming 12,000 calories a day? Your first thought is he's burning it through exercise. He is swimming in the pool for 6 hours a day. But do you remember how hard it is to burn calories through exercise? Remember the exercise we did the first class? It's harder than you think it is. It's the same for him. So he is burning some through swimming in the pool, but I want you to picture Michael Phelps in your mind. What does he look like? Muscle. A lot of muscle. What's the primary contributor to your metabolism? muscle, which is why we put you in a fat-burning, muscle-sparing protocol, because we didn't want to lose that metabolism. Michael Phelps burns calories like crazy because of the amount of muscle he has. So he can lay on the couch all day and burn more calories than you and I can working out all day because of the amount of muscle he has. And so that's the reason. Plus, he's swimming in the pool, and he's swimming in a cold pool, which he has to make up that difference, keeping his temperature at 98.6 degrees. So that's a little more than you wanted to know, but that's the reason he can consume 12,000 calories a day and not be fat. So let's look at Michael Phelps' typical intake of food. So this program showed what he ate for a typical day. So I want you to set a table in your mind. So picture your dining room table. We're going to lay out breakfast, dinner, and lunch of Michael Phelps. So you got your table in your mind? Here we go. Here's breakfast. 3 fried egg sandwiches loaded with cheese, lettuce, tomatoes, fried onions, and mayo. 2 cups of coffee. 1 5-egg omelet. A bowl of grits. 3 slices of French toast topped with powdered sugar. And 3 chocolate chip pancakes. You know what that's called? Breakfast of a champion, right there. Do you see the quantity of food that is? It's a huge amount of food. Now, here's his lunch, so add lunch to that. 1 pound of enriched pasta, 2 large ham and cheese sandwiches with mayo on white bread, energy drinks packing over 1,000 calories. Now add dinner, another pound of pasta, an entire pizza, and more energy drinks. Do you see how much food that is? Do you think you could consume that much food in 2 days? Do you see you have to consume more than twice that much food in 4 days? That was only 12,000 calories a day. In order to gain 4 days, in order to gain 5 pounds of fat, you have to consume 25,500. You're only consuming 24,000 if you eat twice that much in 2 days. You're still 1,500 short of your goal of gaining 5 pounds of fat in a 4-day weekend. It's harder than you think it is. Wasn't that a great magic trick? Now, here's what's happening. I can see you intellectually bought into that, but emotionally, you say he's full of baloney. And here's the reason why. You have stood on a scale on a Thursday night, and it said 175 pounds, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday morning, you stood on the scale, and it said 180 or more pounds. Everybody's experienced that. And you said, I gained 5 pounds of fat in the weekend. No, you didn't. So what I want you to know is your scale lies to you if you think it tells you how fat you are. It doesn't. What does it tell you? How much you weigh only. It doesn't distinguish anything else. So is there some fat on that scale after you eat like that for 4 days? Absolutely, but it's not 5 pounds. So what's the rest of it? What's the rest on the scale? Water. So tell me how you feel after you eat a pasta meal, a pasta dinner. Nap time and bloated. Why do you feel bloated? Because when you eat pasta, that's called fancy twisted white bread noodles. And what's the carbohydrate content of noodles? A big spike, and you spike your insulin level, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but your insulin causes you to retain water. If you don't believe that, remember the first week of the diet I told you you were going to pee a lot? And I was right. And the reason is we dropped your insulin levels, which cause you to throw off water. When you eat pasta, you spike your insulin levels, which cause you to retain water, which causes you to feel bloated after a pasta meal. So water is absolutely going to show up on the scale. Now, ladies know better than men do. Can you gain 4 pounds of water in a day? Absolutely, just by retaining water. So water's on the scale, fat's on the scale. What else is on the scale? I heard people say muscle. No, you're not going to gain 1 pound of muscle in a 4-day weekend. Good luck. So what else is on the scale? If I'm standing on the scale and it says 175 pounds and I eat a 1 pound hamburger, what does the scale now say? 176 pounds. It's not a 3,500 calorie hamburger, but the weight of the food, that 16 ounces, is going to show up on the scale as well. So there's a transit time from the food in to the food out that's going to show up on the scale as well. So nobody here had trouble with constipation while you're on the diet. But if by chance you did, how much did you like to weigh if you were constipated? Not so much, because what happened to the scale? It didn't budge, or it goes up. And the diet coach says, did you have a good week? Yeah, I didn't cheat all week. Ladies, was it that time of the month? Nope. So it's not retaining a water. And they said, well, when was your last bowel movement? You said 4 days ago. And they said, oh, no, we're good. We're good. We're good, because that is not fat. That's just the content of the bowel. Your bowel can have somewhere between 7 and 14 pounds in it. And so just know that that's another factor that's going to show up on the scale. So in other words, remember, your scale lies to you if you think it's telling you how fat you are. It's only telling you how much you weigh. That's why I like not looking at pounds, but I like looking more at percent body fat. It's a way more accurate indication of how you're doing overall. That make sense? Caloric balance. Do you see why caloric balance is important? So, is it hard to gain 5 pounds of fat in a 4-day weekend? Yeah, it's almost impossible. Is it hard to gain 5 pounds of fat in a month? Well, no. That's just an extra 500 calories a day for a month, and you get an extra 5 pounds a month. That's the way we've gained our weight. A lot of people will gain, if you gain 5 pounds a month for 5 months, what happens? It's an extra 25 pounds. All right. Caloric balance. You see why caloric balance is important? Because if you consume too many calories, you gain weight. If you consume too few, you lose weight. We want to maintain weight. So you have to have caloric balance. That's the first act of this 2-act play. Any questions on that first act? Time for act number 2. It's another balance. This one is a hormonal balance. So what are hormones? Well, hormones are chemicals that the body produces that regulates physiological function, regulates how your body works. And here's the way hormones work. One hormone is going to do one thing in the body, and there's another hormone that causes the opposite thing to happen in the body. So when your hormones are balanced, everything is good. When your hormones get out of balance, what happens? Yeah, chaos ensues. So what we want to look at hormonal balance for keeping the weight off for the rest of your life. There's 2 hormones in particular that we're going to review today. The first hormone we've already mentioned and you know about. It is called insulin. The antagonist hormone, or the other hormone that runs the opposite of insulin, is something called glucagon. So insulin and glucagon are 2 hormones that we're going to review. I want you to look through your packet, and I want you to find the handout that says the roles of insulin and glucagon. And what we're going to do is we're going to review these roles of insulin and glucagon. In other words, we're going to memorize this chart. Now I'm going to make it easy for you. You only have to memorize half of it. Because once you memorize what insulin does, what does glucagon do? The exact opposite of it. So let's review insulin. Now you know this first one. When your insulin levels are elevated, they're high, it seeks to lower elevated blood sugar. So let me demonstrate this with something you know. When you get hangry, the television tells you to eat a Snickers candy bar. When you eat a Snickers candy bar, what happens to your blood glucose levels? They spike. Your pancreas now kicks out a bunch of insulin in an attempt to lower your elevated blood sugar levels. Does that make sense? So when your insulin levels are high, it attempts to lower your elevated blood sugar levels. When your insulin levels are high, the body shifts metabolism into storage mode. Storage mode is code speak for what? Fat manufacturing. And so insulin is the one that tells the body to start storing fat. Lots of energy available, stored as extra energy for future use. So insulin triggers fat production. When your insulin levels are high, it converts dietary fat to storage. Dietary fat is an avocado, right? That's dietary fat. Turns it into what kind of fat? Tissue fat. So it takes dietary fat and makes it into tissue, stores it in tissue fat. When your insulin levels are up, it removes fat from your blood and puts it into the fat cell, which we just described. When your insulin levels are up, it increases the body's production of cholesterol. A lot of times people that have had blood panels, after they've been on the diet, they'll say, my cholesterol's dropped huge. And the reason is because they're not eating cholesterol? No, that's not the reason they're not eating cholesterol. The reason is because cholesterol is increased. Your body produces cholesterol when your insulin levels are increased. And what did we do to your insulin levels when we put you in phase 1? We dropped your insulin levels. So what happens to your cholesterol? Your cholesterol drops. The next one we've already talked about. When your insulin levels are up, it causes your kidneys to retain fluid. That's retaining water. When your insulin levels are up, I like this one. Listen up here, high blood pressure. When your insulin levels are up, it says it stimulates the growth of your arterial muscles. So here's an artery. Here's the lumen or the opening of an artery. That artery has muscle, smooth muscle around that artery. When you increase that muscle, when that smooth muscle increases, what happens to the hole? It goes smaller. And so when that vessel goes down, what happens to your blood pressure? It increases, right? So that's why we'll look at the glucagon, which does the opposite, why blood pressure goes down. One of the reasons. And then the other one says when your insulin level goes up, it stimulates the use of glucose for energy. What's your primary source of energy when your insulin levels are up? Glucose. Now, let's go through glucagon. When your glucagon levels are up, it seeks to raise your low blood glucose levels. So now we try to bring the blood glucose levels up when your glucagon levels are high. When your glucagon levels are high, it shifts body into, what does it say? Burning mode, which is code speak for ketosis. Fat burning mode, ketosis. And now it converts protein and fat into glucose for a source of energy. It releases fat into the blood for use by the tissues for energy. And that fat is released in the form, when it's broken down, turns into a ketone, which is where we get ketosis from. So now you're using ketones as your source of energy for your tissues. When your glucagon levels are up, it decreases the body's production of cholesterol, which is why cholesterol goes down. When your glucagon levels are up, it makes the kidneys release fluid. That's called peeing a lot, which throws off the fluid. And then it stimulates the slow regression of those arterial muscles. So those smooth muscles relax so that your blood pressure will drop. And it stimulates the use of fat for a source of energy instead of glucose for a source of energy. Does that make sense? So you see what insulin does, what glucagon level does? So let me ask you, when you were in phase 1 of the diet, were you on a hormonally balanced diet regarding insulin and glucagon? Absolutely we're not. What did we do to your insulin levels? We lowered your insulin levels, relatively raising your glucagon levels so that we can shift you into ketosis, so you use fat as your primary source of energy. Now we go into phase 2 and phase 3, we want these hormones to balance out. So how do we balance insulin and glucagon? It's a good question, isn't it? So flip your page over, and on the back of that page it says the influence of food on insulin and glucagon. So I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. I want you to review this chart, memorize it, and then what we'll do is we'll test you and see if you know how foods influence insulin and glucagon. If you fail the test, all the weight comes back, so no pressure or anything like that. All right, I'm going to give you a few seconds to look at the type of food and then what happens to your insulin and your glucagon when you eat that type of a food. All right, you're a smart class, so I'm not going to give you a full 15 seconds. When you eat just a carbohydrate, what happens to your insulin levels? It spikes your insulin levels. Somebody count the stars. How many star response? 5-star response. What happens to your glucagon when you eat just a carbohydrate? No difference in your glucagon levels. When you eat just a protein, what happens? It's a balance. It's a 2-star insulin response. It's a 2-star glucagon response. It's a balanced hormonal response. Interestingly enough, when you eat just a fat, what happens? No change. Fat doesn't affect the insulin to a large degree, doesn't affect glucagon and insulin. Does that mean you can ignore fat? No, remember, because what happens to caloric balance when you have too much fat? So this is why the Atkins diet was such a phase, because can you eat fat and still be in ketosis? Absolutely can. All right. Now drop down to where it says typical American diet. Okay, she did it. She didn't. It doesn't say typical American diet, but what's a typical American diet? High carb, low protein. What happens when you eat a high carb, low protein diet?
Way up.
Way up. Somebody count the stars.
9.
9-star response versus a 1-star on glucagon. Folks, that looks like this. And when you're like this, remind me what the body shifts into. What kind of mode does it shift into when your insulin spikes? Fat production mode. Tell me why we have an obesity epidemic in the United States. This is the reason why. There's no other reason why. Is because we're not eating correctly, because we're having overstimulation of your insulins. Now go to where it says Billings' last diet protocol. All right, I don't even like what it says. It doesn't say Billings' last diet protocol, and I don't like what it says because it says high protein, low carb. But this just came out of a physiology book, so I had to go with what was written on it. Is this a high protein diet? No. It's what kind of a diet? Ideal protein, not a high protein diet. But when you see where it says on there high protein, low carb, do you see how that's more of a balanced response? So the way we regulate and balance glucagon and insulin is by eating our foods appropriately. Which of these macronutrients, carb, protein, or fat, is the one that balances the best for glucagon and insulin? Protein, protein, protein. And so if you want to have a balanced hormonal response, you need to make sure you're getting protein when you eat a carb. Because when you eat a carbohydrate, what happens to your insulin levels? When you put a carbohydrate and a protein cut together, what happens to your insulin levels? It tapers that insulin response. Does that make sense? And so to balance these hormones, you need to watch your carb, protein, and fat intake. Does that sound a lot like something called a macro code? So once we're now in phase 2 and phase 3, what we're going to do is we watch these hormonal balances by looking at your macros. Another word for macros is food combining. We have to combine our foods appropriately in order to maintain a hormonal balance. Makes sense? And so when you eat breakfast, what's a typical American breakfast? Not the one that's on the menu at the restaurant, but what do people typically eat for breakfast in the morning? Cereal? Cold cereal? What kind of cold cereal? Fruit Loops and Cocoa Puffs? Tell me what's going to happen to your insulin levels when you start your morning with Fruit Loops and Cocoa Puffs. And so you're healthier than that because you've learned that you have to be careful what you eat. So now I'm just going to eat a piece of fruit in the morning. Tell me what happens to your insulin when you eat just a piece of fruit. It's the same insulin response. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't matter whether you eat a donut or a piece of fruit. There's nutritional differences, but what do you need to have with that piece of fruit? Protein. How do you get protein with a piece of fruit? You see the way we need to think? How about we put some nuts with that piece of fruit? How about we have a protein drink with that piece of fruit? How about we put a spread of peanut butter on the apple slices as we eat the apple slices? Do you see what I mean? And so we need to start this food combining in order to have the proper macro code. So you notice you have so many servings of fats that you're eating, so many servings of proteins, and so many servings of carbs that you're eating. And we put those in a balanced format. That's what we did in phase 2 during the step down week and during the stabilization phase, is to figure out what's the proper macro code for you so you maintain a hormonal balance. Does that make sense? Any questions on hormonal balance? Do you see why you need to maintain a hormonal balance? Now, in phase 1, we weren't in a hormonal balance. We had insulin levels go down, where glucagons go up so you can go into ketosis. Phase 2, stabilization phase, we've balanced those out. Now in phase 3 for maintenance, we need to keep those balanced out to keep that weight off for the rest of your life. That's the second act of this 2-act play. Do you see why the second act needs to be understood and lived by? Do you see why the first act needs to be understood and lived by? And both of them together equals success for long term. Very good. Any questions on that? All right, let's go through 5 tips for long-term success. By the way, there's a handout that you have that's going to have those 2 balances, and it also has the 5 tips for long-term success. That's your cheat sheet. So when I ask you what number 1 is, I won't ask you what number 1 is. Number 1 tip for long-term success is you need to get protein. Every meal, and this is the hard one, most snacks need to get protein. Now, getting protein every meal, you see why you need to do that in order to take your insulin levels and stabilize those. Most snacks is the hard one, because what do we like to snack on? Chips. Yeah, primarily carbs and fats, and preferably carbs and fats combined together, which is called yummy. And so, how do you eat chips then? Does that mean you never eat chips when you're in the maintenance phase? No, that's not what it means. There's nothing that's off the table. But what do you need to do if you're having some chips? What do you need to do? You need to have protein with it. So play a game with me. How do you get proteins with a chip? What's that? Yeah. Throw them away. Yeah. Oh, put a weenie in there. Put a hot dog in there. Sure. Good. What else? So what kind of a dip would you put with it? Peanut butter. Okay. Very good.
Cheese.
Or cheese?
That would work.
Yes, because dairy is the primary protein. Now there's fats and there's carbs in there as well. And so what else do you like to eat, snack-wise? Fruit? Yep, we snack on fruit. So what do you need with fruit? You need to have cheese with your apple or spread of peanut butter, or some nuts be a fruit and a nut. Put some nuts with your, where do you have to be careful with nuts? Nuts are higher in fat, so you need to watch your portion control. Just be careful with your portion control. What's a serving of nuts? A handful. Not hands full, it's a handful. It's 1/4 cup is a serving of nuts. But that's a good way to put it with it. Good. So most meals, hopefully you're getting the idea that you need to have protein with your meals. We just need to make sure now that you're moving into more snacks that you get protein with your snacks. And so nobody likes popcorn for a snack, right? So what do you do with popcorn? You put butter on it. Remember, that's a carb and a fat. Yep, so what do you do with your popcorn? You go to the movie. You sneak drinks in anyway. Sneak a protein drink in instead of having a pop. Have a protein drink with your pop. So that's the way we need to think. So I'm going to take a theoretical with you. It's almost 6 o'clock. Let's say you've already consumed your calories for the day. You've eaten your food for the day. Your phone rings and it's your friends and they say, meet me at Dairy Queen. Let's go for ice cream sundaes. Now, can you do that? Absolutely. It's not off the table. So now you go to Dairy Queen to have ice cream sundaes. Now you're looking at the menu. What are you going to do? You're going to order an ice cream sundae. What do you need to do with your ice cream sundae? You need to get a protein with it. There you go. Ask for bacon on. Bacon's a fat, not really a protein. Seriously, order a grilled chicken breast. And put that on top of the ice cream, not on top of the ice cream sundae, but eat that with the ice cream sundae. What that does is that takes that insulin response that's going to be there from the ice cream, you add that extra protein, it's going to taper out that insulin response. That's the food combining that needs to happen. Now wait, hold on. We were already at our caloric max for the day. Now we go and eat an ice cream sundae and a chicken breast. You see how we blew caloric balance through the ceiling? So this is what I want you to take home. I will always sacrifice caloric balance in an attempt to maintain hormonal balance. Here's the reason why. How long do I have on this hormonal balance to make sure I get my carbs and my proteins combined together? About 1 hour. I have about an hour to balance out my hormones. How about this caloric balance? Those extra calories I eat tonight by eating my chicken breast and my ice cream sundae are going to circulate in my blood for about a 24-hour period of time. Then if it's not consumed, it's stored as fat for future use. So I have a way long period of time for caloric balance than I do for hormonal balance. So I eat my chicken breast and my ice cream sundae tonight to get a hormonal balance. What do I need to do tomorrow to help with my caloric balance? I need to cut back. I need to go into more phase 1 eating than I did when I eat the chicken breast with the ice cream sundae. Does that make sense? So I will always sacrifice caloric balance in an attempt to maintain hormonal balance. This is why it's protein every meal in most snacks. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 for long-term success. This is called your trigger number. Has your diet coach talked to you about your trigger number? Maybe. Your trigger number is the number you will not go above. So let's take a theoretical. Let's say I weighed 200 pounds. I lost 25 pounds. I'm now at 175 pounds. Is it reasonable for me to say my trigger number is 177 pounds? Is that reasonable? Not reasonable. Why? I can retain 2 pounds of water in a day. So is it reasonable for me to say my trigger number is 190 pounds? That's not very reasonable. That's too much. So for trigger number, the number you won't go above, it's going to be somewhere in the single digits to low double digits that you'll play with. Does that make sense? And it's called a trigger number because how does a trigger on a gun work? When you pull the trigger, what happens? An automatic response happens. So this is called a trigger number. If you hit your trigger number, your phone should be programmed to call 294-6751. That's answered this way: Billings last diet. Can I help you? And the answer is yes, please help me. Is it easier to maintain and play with 3 or 4 pounds or 30 or 40 pounds? So play in the 3 or 4 pound range, or 6 or 7, depending on where your trigger number is. So watch your trigger number. If you hit your trigger number and discuss it with your diet coach, then you call and let's get you in. Now the key to keeping that trigger number under control is keep coming back, which is the next one that I'll talk about. It's number 3. This is to follow your coach. How good are the coaches? They're phenomenal. Did they know what they were doing in phase 1? Yes. Did they know what they were doing in phase 2? Yes. Do they know what they're doing in phase 3? Yes. So listen to what they tell you. Now they're going to tell you to do things you don't want to do. How fun was it to the step down week, calculating all those things out? That was for your own benefit, for long-term success, to figure that out how you eat. Now, I know you don't like to keep the food journal. Some people are crazy and like the food journal, but I don't like a food journal. Does that mean you have to keep a food journal the rest of your life? The answer is no. Once you figure out how to eat to keep that weight off, so once you're 3 or 4 weeks in maintenance, 3 or 4 months in maintenance, the food journal can go away. But if you start to creep up, what's the first thing the coach is going to say? Give me a food journal. We need to know, is this a caloric balance problem or hormonal balance problem or a combination of the two? The only way we can know that is through a food journal. So the coach will say, let's start a food journal. We want to help you lose the weight for the rest of your life. That's why we call it Billings' Last Diet. How much does it cost you to visit with a diet coach? Nothing. So your diet coach is going to tell you to keep coming back. And we're telling you, you keep coming back. Let us help you keep you accountable long term. Now, life happens and stuff happens in life. We understand that. You just come back and let us help you keep that under control. Does that make sense? So follow your coach. Do what your coach tells you to do. One thing they're going to tell you to do is keep a food journal as long as you need to. The other thing they're going to tell you to do is make sure you keep checking back in. And they'll also give you tips for keeping the weight off for the rest of your life. Tip number 4 for long-term success. This is called a tune-up. You're going to do a tune-up 2 times a year. So what's a tune-up? A tune-up is not an overhaul. What you did when you lost weight was an overhaul. A tune-up is we're going to just do a little bit of a tweak a couple of times in a year. So it's very normal for people to gain somewhere between 5 and 8 pounds per year. That's the way a lot of people have gained their weight. You gain 5 pounds a year for 5 years, you get an extra 25 pounds. So we know it's normal to gain 5 to 8 pounds in a year. So twice a year, what we're going to do is we're going to do a tune-up. Tune-up means you're going to go into phase 1 for either 1, 2, or 3 weeks. How do we determine if you're 1, 2, or 3 weeks on tune-up? How much tuning up needs to be done? How much do you need to get back where you want to be? So 1, 2, or 3 weeks in phase 1, then you go right back into phase 3. That make sense? Do that twice a year. I'm a big fan of April and October. October is a good time for a tune-up, so this is great. So next April you'll have one, and then next October you'll have one. Why October? Just before the holidays. Why April? Just after the holidays, and you get you into the summer. So number 5 for tips for long-term success, now it's time to work out. Some of you have missed working out. Some of you have not wanted to work out. Well, for those of you who are missing working out, it's good news. For those that don't want to work out, this is good news as well. You're going to work out. Why do we want you to work out? Say that louder. For muscle. It's not to have you burn the extra calories to keep the weight off, which there's a benefit there, but it's not that much. We want to help you maintain your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. What's the primary contributor to your base metabolic rate? Muscle mass, muscle mass, muscle mass. So most days of the week you need to be working out. Now, is that 3 days a week? Nope, most is at least 4 days a week. 2 of those days a week, do some resistance training. Doesn't mean you have to be a meathead and go to the gym. Doesn't mean you can't, but do some resisting training. An air squat is resisting training. A wall push-up is resistance training. Do something to stress your muscle. That's the way you keep your muscle, is by stressing your muscle. Good. So quick review. Caloric balance. You see why it's important? That's the first act of the 2-act play. Hormonal balance. You see why it's important? That's the second act of the 2-act play. These 5 tips for long-term success, number 1 is there for a reason, and that is because you need to get those, the proteins you need to balance out those carbohydrates. Watch your trigger number, do what your coach says to do a tune-up twice a year, and then do your workouts. Any questions on that? Congratulations to all of you on your successful weight loss, and congratulations in advance on keeping it off for the rest of your life. And so I do have a request of you. People have said, what have you done? How have you lost the weight? Tell them there's this crazy group called Billings' Last Diet. They think they've got the answer for the healthcare crisis in the United States. And send them in here and let's get our people healthy. Let's get to the underlying cause of the healthcare crisis in the United States. And there is no doubt that the lifestyle is the underlying cause. So tell them, go see these crazy people called Billings' Last Diet. They'll help you lose that weight and keep it off the rest of your life. Congratulations once again on your weight loss. If you have any questions or concerns at any time, don't hesitate to let us know. Never leave this office until you have your next appointment. That's another good tip for long-term success, because here's what happens. Over the course of time, you might be coming where you're just coming once a month for a check-in. And that's great. But you're going to say to the front desk, I don't know what my schedule next month is, so I'll just give you a call. And what happens? Yeah, 6 months later. And so make your appointment, whether you know what your schedule is or not. When it comes up to that time, we can adjust that appointment to be at the right. Very good. Oh, one more thing. There is a My Experience in your, some of you might have already figured it out. It's filled it out. It's a My Experience form that looks like this, that tells us how you did on the diet. The good, the bad, the ugly. If you'll take time to fill that out and bring that into your diet coach, at the bottom is where you give permission or not to have your name put up on the wall of fame as well. So fill that out and return that to us if you would. Very good. Congratulations again on your weight loss, and congratulations, Vince, in keeping that lifestyle to keep it off the rest of your life. Thanks a lot.